Hey everybody, this is Alicia Halliday, the Chief Science Officer of the Autism Science Foundation. Thank you for joining the SAM-SIBS Stick Together panel. This week we are taking, or this month, we are taking your questions. We have solicited questions from the community and gotten some great ones, but we'll still have the ability to answer more. So as we go through these questions, you're gonna be able to ask questions. This is our panel. The panel is Samantha Els. This is her with her brother Ben. She is a student at Stanford University. We also have Nathan Bliss. He is a student with a sibling at Texas A&M University, and so they are the sibling portion of the panel. And then this week or this month, we have an extra added benefit where we have clinicians who work both at the Els Center for Autism, the Els Autism Center, and Mount Sinai School of Medicine, and they're going to be adding a clinical perspective to some of your questions today. And what I'm going to do is allow everyone to introduce themselves. We're going to go ahead and start with the clinicians since I just mentioned them. So Erin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, hi everybody. Thank you so much, Alicia. My name is Erin Brooker-Lozat, and I'm the Director of Clinical Services and Global Support at Els for Autism Foundation. And I have the luxury and advantage and I guess pleasure of overseeing all therapeutic services, essentially from diagnosis and young children, not even 15 to 18 months of age, all the way through adulthood, and also get to provide direct service to some families through parent training or consultation to our let's say our adult day program, things of that nature. I also run and oversee an international program that's a train the trainer approach. So we have families from all over the world that are served through Els for Autism Foundation. There's actually 4 Els for Autism Foundations in South Africa, 1 Canada, the UK, and then us here in the United States. So from a global standpoint, we have a lot of reach. And I've been here 5 years and really excited for this opportunity. So thank you.
Kimberly, you're next.
Can't hear you.
Okay, hi. My dog was barking. I'm Dr. Kimberly Romacchio. Oh, he's got great timing. And I'm with the Els for Autism Foundation as well, and I'm on our mental health counseling team, and my background is in school counseling and mental health counseling, with some experience in advocacy and working with families with IEPs and special needs. And I have a connection to the autism community, both professionally and personally. So it's really provided me a really neat opportunity to kind of use my background and my personal experience. And long before COVID, our team with Erin Brooker-Lozat, we were planning to begin SIB shops and sibling programs. And then when the pandemic occurred and we all needed to go home, we quickly wanted to provide support to those siblings, knowing that there was going to be additional pressures put on the family. And so along with many virtual programs, we included a SIB room and SIB Stick Together room, and it meets every other week. And currently the age range is approximately 8 to 13 years old. And so we're building upon this program. We're seeing such a need for this population to receive services. So it's really been an honor and a pleasure to work with these very special people. I'm learning a lot from them. So thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. Paige?
You're muted. It went to like an auto, mine did the same thing.
Oh dear.
Yeah, you have to redo it, yeah. Not yet. Top right corner.
All right, now can you hear me? Now we're good? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Paige Seiber. I'm a clinical psychologist and the chief psychologist at the Seiber Autism Center at Mount Sinai in New York City. I wear a couple of different hats. So in the clinical research world, I oversee a bunch of different research studies at our center, including the Autism Sisters Project, which was a wonderful way for me to get to meet so many incredible families, parents, and siblings. In my clinical practice, I treat the whole family. So I work with individuals with autism and related conditions, and I've also spent a lot of time working with siblings of various ages and parents and really figuring out how we can best help the whole family to get to a place where everyone feels happy and comfortable, and working through some of the issues that we'll get to talk about today. So I'm really honored to be a part of this group today.
Thanks. We're going to go counterclockwise, and I'm going to ask Nathan from these photos, and I'm going to ask Nathan to introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. So my name is Nathan Bliss, and I'm studying biomedical engineering at Texas A&M University. I hope to pursue neuroscience in the future. So my older brother, Charles, is on the autism spectrum. He also has a rare genetic disorder, Phelan-McDermid syndrome, in which most of the individuals have autism spectrum disorder or intellectual disability, and about half of them have severe epilepsy. And so, yeah, I'm really glad to be a part of this panel. It's helped me see the similarities and differences we share as siblings, as well as our unique perspective on growing up with siblings with special needs. So thank you very much.
And last but definitely not least is Samantha Ells, our fearless leader. Samantha, would you just give a quick introduction of yourself? Oh yeah, great. She's on the video now. That's great.
Sorry, I had it on 2 screens. Hi, everyone. So I'm Samantha Ells, and I am here because my younger brother, Ben, is on the spectrum. I am currently studying human biology at Stanford with the hope to pursue global public health and health equity in the future. And I'm really just here today to help provide a perspective from the families and from the siblings. And I'm by no means the technical side of this. And that's why I'm so thankful for all of our older panelists and all of those that are actually professionally pursuing this. And yeah, that's all I got.
Great. Thank you guys all. We got a bunch of great questions. Let's go ahead and just delve into them. And sorry, everybody, if you don't see my picture, it's because I'm trying to save bandwidth. So let's go ahead and just delve into the questions. So we got some great questions before this, before we convened, and I hope we get some more as we, as we continue the discussion. So the 3 were, what would you suggest? And this goes for both, I shouldn't have said parents, the panelists, so siblings and clinicians. What would you guys suggest to families who are now forced together in this pandemic? And the autism sibling is expressing higher levels of aggression and frustration to the undiagnosed sibling. So this is actually a question we got for this panel, but we also have gotten it elsewhere. And then the second one, for parents of younger children, how would this panel, including the siblings and the clinicians, how would you foster tolerance in the unaffected siblings? So one of the things we learned from the number of different webinars and discussions we had previously was that there is a high level of patience and tolerance in the siblings that has really improved that relationship. So what has worked and what should actually be avoided? And then finally, how do you ease the transition of not only siblings staying at home during the pandemic, but then leaving again when conditions ease? So we're at a point where things are starting to open up again. And while the transition to have, this undiagnosed sibling or unaffected sibling in the house was difficult, now they're leaving again. And so any tips or ideas that you guys can share, both the sibling panel and the clinicians, would be amazing. So let's go ahead and start with the first question, which was, what would you suggest, and I'm going to change this to siblings and clinicians, sorry, to families who are now forced together and the autistic sibling is expressing higher levels of aggression and frustration due to many different things, and we don't need to discuss, we don't need to dissect them, but we could, to the undiagnosed sibling. And so I thought we could have, we could go through this order. We could go Sam, I can't even read my own handwriting, I apologize. Sam, Aaron, Kimberly, and Paige. And so Sam, if you could start out with what you would suggest to families who are now forced together. The autistic sibling is reacting to this by expressing increased levels of aggression and frustration. How do you help the undiagnosed sibling in this situation?
So I think it's a really important question to obviously all of us at the moment. And I'm actually going to be drawing a little bit from what Paige was saying. So without getting too repetitive, we've had a bunch of conversations in my family about how our roles are going to have to change, and how it's about understanding not only what Ben needs, because obviously that's incredibly important, but it's about balancing what each person needs as well. So there's going to be certain days where I'm not going to have quite enough energy to spend a whole day with anyone in my family, be that my mom, my dad, my brother, anyone. Everyone needs the opportunity to take a step back and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this activity with Ben today. I'm going to take Ben to the beach in the morning, and then I'm going to have the afternoon to do whatever I need to do that's going to keep me calm. So especially in a situation where everyone's more frustrated, it's not just going to be the children on the spectrum, it's going to be the parents who are now sitting all day long with probably not just one kid that's doing online learning, but 2, 3, as many as there are in the family. And I know that it's been particularly frustrating for people like me that are coming back from college, and we're now in a setting back with our parents, which is a shared situation for a lot of people, because you feel like now you've had all of these experiences and you've gone and you've become an adult for a little bit, and then you're back in your childhood bedroom with your posters from when you were maybe in the 6th grade. I don't know. So it's about finding that balance for everybody and understanding that not every day has to be all about one person.
Thanks, Sam. What about you, Erin?
Okay, sorry, I wanted to make sure I unmuted. Well, I couldn't agree more with Samantha. And in reading these questions, my first thought as a clinician came to evidence-based practices and all the prevention strategies that we can put in place. So in thinking about a time where there's a lack of structure, a lack of predictability, a lack of, if you will, assigned roles and responsibilities that traditionally would almost be innately set by the nature of a child being in school and the parent dropping off and then the parent going to work. And now all of a sudden, this is essentially all stirred up, and the way it lands isn't the perfect recipe anymore. And we have to figure out how to take these same ingredients and rework them. I think adding, and for anybody, adding a schedule is going to be helpful, whether it be me as an adult with no diagnosis as of today. Who knows what will come after maybe Paige and I talk, but in thinking about having a visual schedule. So it's not just for the person with autism, but for the whole family, like Sam said, is being able to understand what is the plan, what is the family plan, what is the schedule, and the accommodation we would make for the person with autism to make sure they understand it, as possibly, if they're not necessarily a reader, or even if they are in time distress, to add pictures to it so it's understood by everybody. And maybe it's, what's mom's schedule for the day? What's my schedule for the day? What's dad's schedule for the day? What's sibling A, B, and C schedule for the day? And who's responsible for what? So actually, Sam and Kim and I spoke earlier about this concept of who's on first and who's on second. And if you have plan A and you think of a plan and you think you have predictability and structure, I think we need to go with the thought of we need to think again and have plan B and plan C in place potentially too. Who's my backup if, like Samantha said, she doesn't have the energy to move through the day, even if it was part of the plan, that each family member has this, I guess, pact that they make, that they can say, I need someone to help me today so that I can take a break, and that you already have these assigned roles and responsibilities of, just like at work, if I'm going to be out, I know who to call that's going to cover for me, and you can have this as part of this family plan. So visual schedules, full family plans, identifying responsibilities and roles and the backup plans for that in case you need a break to refuel, to be able to support, or in case you're the better fit for the individual with autism in the family to lead that specific situation that that person may be in that's becoming frustrating, because every person responds differently, right, to different people in different settings. I also feel like possible, from an evidence-based practice standpoint, these preventative strategies, right, that we predict and prevent as much as possible. We can think about the language that we're using as a family, as some terms for individuals can be triggers for different behaviors. And if we're all on the same page and we're using predictable language, like first we're going to do this, then we're going to do that, this may also help make sure all information that's communicated is very clear and concrete versus abstract and ambiguous, so that it would decrease someone's understanding that may essentially promote anxiety. So those are just a couple of ideas that I had that are general recommendations, but possibly we've tried them and they haven't gone well because things are crazy in the world, but maybe we haven't tried them in the way where we all do it. We don't just use the evidence-based practice strategy for the person with autism, but we take the evidence-based practice prevention strategies and we use them for the entire family unit. And I think in that it may help decrease some of the need for the downtime, the need for anxiety to come up or stress. And the last part of this is engagement in productive activities. And I know for me as a mom, as well as for many of our parents, we're always thinking about what do we need to do to help the child with autism get through their learning. We have to make sure they're constantly learning. And I think in this time especially, we're not looking to have parents become teachers or therapists. So really maximizing the use of everyday routines and keeping everybody productive. So how can your child help with the laundry, or your children, how can they help with taking the garbage out, checking the mail, watering plants, things that have to be done anyway, that are going to build skills naturally, may be a nice way to not have so much downtime, which would then again possibly decrease structure, predictability, and end up in possibly promoting behaviors that you less desirable behaviors. Sorry, that was a lot. It's a big
No,
question.
it wasn't a lot. It was great. Sorry. That was great. Kimberly, what would you like to add?
Sure, absolutely. I think in addition to the very wonderful and helpful information, I would say to involve the sibling in the discussion, in the plan, and be very clear with them as to what your expectations are for them. I know Paige has some really helpful ways to communicate with your child, and so I look forward to hearing those specifics. But as far as letting them know what you expect from them during that meltdown or tantrum, you know, that's a common theme that it was part of this question. It was kind of the latter part of this question, but it's also something that comes up quite often with the younger siblings is, what do I do when my sibling is having a meltdown or tantrum? And it's scary for me, and I feel worried. So I would say, for the adult to have a plan, let them know what you expect or how you want them to respond during that moment before the moment is occurring. So it might mean that as the parent, you want to provide a safe place for that if it's a younger child, to go during that moment. So they know their instruction right away, go to your maybe beanbag in your room with music or a book, something that you can do, and we will, as the adult, we will tend to this moment and we will come back to you. And a lot of our siblings really want to be involved in helping. They're helpers, they're empathic, they're kind, and they want to be a part of it. I think you might decide to bring them in sort of after that difficult moment has passed as sort of a reinforcement, maybe an activity with their sibling that they both enjoy, whether it's cuddle time, cartoon time, something like that. They might come back and be involved in that portion, but being clear with the sibling of what's expected of them. A lot of their concerns tend to be what is going to happen in the future. And they might not verbalize it quite that way, but wanting to know what's expected of them in the future and what role they play. So having those conversations with them, taking that special time with them, embedding it in your natural part of your day. We don't need another to do. No one's saying, you have to sit on the floor and do playtime for an hour with that sibling, but maybe using an opportunity that you already have, like having them help you cook dinner. And while you're cooking dinner, maybe, or bath time, something of that effect that's already happening in your day, and using that to kind of reflect feelings and validate their feelings, take questions, and, involving them in what's happening with the family.
Thank you. Paige,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
So both Erin and Kim, excellent points, and I think really, I think it lends well to talking about some of the emotional aspects. So having a plan, making sure everyone knows what to expect, everyone knows what their role is, and Kim, you brought up such a good point about the child, and it's so important for the sibling not to feel that it's their responsibility, that they didn't do anything wrong that caused the aggression or the frustration, and also that it's also not on them to have to solve the problem, right? And so I think that's so important, that even if the sibling might be kind of the outlet in a given moment for the aggression, having the parent acknowledge that it's not their fault, and then having a plan for when it happens so that the whole family knows exactly what to do and everyone takes on their role in the moment. And I think that idea of really validating and reflecting the experiences of everyone in the household. So this is effective for siblings, but also for spouses, other caregivers, the individual with autism, that it's so important to really validate what that emotional experience is, even when you as an individual might not be able to relate to it. So you can still validate how someone else is feeling, even if that's not your own emotional experience, right? You could validate, I know it's really frustrating for you when so-and-so becomes dysregulated. I understand it doesn't make your body comfortable, or I understand it's really upsetting or it's really difficult. And I think that there's so much that happens when someone validates your emotional experience, in that it then opens the door for conversation. It opens the door for you to be allowed to experience whatever emotion is your body's experiencing, right? We all have different emotions. We don't choose what emotions our bodies feel. And it's so important for us to feel that it's okay to experience whatever we're feeling, right? There's no wrong way to feel, especially about these situations. And when we have a plan about what the behavior looks like, that means we can also permit our feelings, and then take an actionable step, using a plan where we know what to expect. I also think that kind of unconditional love is so important, that oftentimes we all tell our children, and I think we like to tell our parents that we love them, but I think reminding them that no matter how frustrated you are or how hard this situation is, that love is always there, right? That we're always a family and we're always a team and we're in this together. And I think that's important. The kind of third piece of advice specific to this question, and also relates to the next one, is the idea of connectedness, right? It is so important for us to feel connected to our families. And it's so much about the quality of the time that we're spending and really not about the quantity. So I think as much as we can accept, okay, my sibling is likely going to require a lot more in terms of the quantity of time of my parent or of somebody's attention, which doesn't mean that the quality of my relationship or the connectedness of my relationship with my parent needs to suffer, right? And so how do we do that? So research has shown that 5 minutes a day of one-on-one quality time with a parent can really build the parent-child relationship, and can kind of reduce risk for a lot of different mental health conditions, especially looking at children, but it works at every age. So if families if each parent could dedicate 5 minutes of their undivided attention to really each sibling, whether they have autism or not, but time when it's what I like to call child, and it can be an adult sibling also, but their child, so child directed. So for a younger kid, it might look like the child's directing the play, and this is a time for the parent to validate their experiences and to engage in the play. For older individuals, I always say with teenagers, how cool if mom or dad played the video games with you. Like, that's a very nice time to connect. And even with older individuals, where where the conversation is being led by the child rather than the parent. And this is really a time to be a listener, and active listening is so important, right? Sometimes, and people probably can relate to the idea of you share something that's frustrating and immediately, oftentimes we go into that problem solving mode, right? Like, okay, you can do this, you can do this. Well, why didn't you do this? Well, I'm sure we could figure it out this way. And sometimes we just want to vent, right? We just want to like sit with our emotion and say how we're feeling. And when we can actually kind of sit on, we like to call it like sitting on the feelings bench, right? Like when you can actually sit with your emotion, that's when you actually can start to problem solve and work through that emotion to get to the place where the next time a situation happens, maybe it doesn't feel, the emotion doesn't feel as strong, right? And so I think also for siblings to know, you know, to be able to share with parents, you know, I'm not asking for your advice right now. I just want you to listen, right? Like, I just want you to be a listening ear. I just want to let you know how I'm feeling. It feels good to share, right? And really having those open lines of communication, I think, is so important.
This is great advice, not just for immediate, you know, the immediate times, but this whole situation with the pandemic is ever changing and ever evolving. And so this is great input, you know, not just for this immediate time, but, you know, just in general. So thank you guys. Yes.
Before we go to the next, I'm sorry, before we go on to the next question, just Paige, you said something that was really important about being an active listener and hearing what the children were saying. And I think that we need to remember that there's a very large population of individuals with autism that, not necessarily siblings, but the individuals with autism that have these behaviors, that are using their behaviors as their primary mode of communication, because either they don't yet have the language verbally to use, they don't have a proficient augmentative and alternative communication system. And so one of the things that may be a helpful tip is to remember that we can look, the behavior is communication and communication is behavior in all individuals, and that we can look to the individual that's having these behaviors that we're calling aggressive. You know, we don't know what that means or what's involved in that at this point, but what is the behavior communicating? And if we were to be able to model language or a better way to communicate or interpret that behavior, even if we didn't replace it with more conventional communication, would that help us be able to, like you said, Paige, help solve a problem that maybe isn't the responsibility of the sibling? Because there's a lot of individuals that can't use verbal language for emotional expression. And in those moments, this is probably why we have a lot to say, but we're using less conventional or less adaptive means to get our points across. And oftentimes we don't look at behaviors as being communicative in nature. And so a lot of the times we see individuals with autism that are not necessarily verbal, they're minimally verbal, or that are verbal but then get stressed and break down in their language skills, as we all do. And we forget to say, what are they actually telling me? So I think your point, Paige, of being an active listener, observing and listening comes whether the individual is verbal or nonverbal or minimally verbal, and that we have to think, what is the message being sent? Is it that I need more information? Is it that I am confused? You know, is it that I am trying to tell you I don't want something? Am I uncomfortable? Do I not feel well? All the questions that are probably in a person with autism's head that they're unable to ask in a way that everybody understands right away. We need to be even more active in our listening to pick up on those subtleties or those less conventional means so that we can move forward. And I think that in itself is a huge tip that probably at surface, when a behavior is happening, we don't think about, what is this behavior telling me?
And I think to add to that, there's also that reframe, right? Which is that the aggressive behavior or the unwanted behavior is actually amazing because they are communicating, right? I always think when someone swipes something off my desk in the clinic and the parent apologizes, I say, no, they're telling me they don't want to do this. That's a wonderful thing. They're letting me know what they want, right? And so I think if we can reframe how we think about the aggression and really think about trying to understand, like, wow, this is wonderful. They're communicating something to me. What are they communicating? I think that can help kind of shift that goal of kind of coming together to problem solve rather than kind of feeling like you need to withdraw.
Right, because you have something to problem solve about, right? Exactly. And in that sense, when I'm upset or anybody's upset, we're human beings, and someone acknowledges, even if they don't give us what we want, that they have heard us, that they know what we're saying. That is such a sign of respect, and honoring someone in that way is a calming, has a calming mechanism. You may not fulfill what they need, right? But to say, you know, this is what I hear you saying, or to model from their perspective if they don't have language in that moment, that in itself says to, oh, she gets it. She heard me. She understands what I'm saying now. So now right there, it kind of helps reset at times, not always, but it may just be something to think about. I like using the word reframe. I know Kim just did a tip of the week on reframing thoughts, and it's a perfect marriage of our two fields, right?
It's the time definitely to pull up the reframing skills with all of this going on, and it's very powerful. And like you said, you see the need, and the aggressive behavior can be shaped so that they're able to communicate it more effectively and, you know, what is considered more appropriately.
Yeah, I guess I was going to add to that, I think a lot of the strategies that you guys have covered have been like really great beyond the scope of just aggressive behaviors, because I'm not sure I'm entirely equipped to provide strategies to manage aggression. Charles doesn't really have aggressive tendencies, but we've definitely seen some behavioral changes over the course of quarantine. Charles would normally be far more active in his like daily routine, going to the pool, at the gym, getting exercise at school, and other activities, but it's been hard being at home. He's been so antsy and cooped up like all the time, and it's so hot in Houston that we like can't get outside for too long. But we've tried to keep some normalcy, and like Aaron had talked about, some predictability in his daily routine, getting him out when we can and doing socially distanced activities, daily fine motor and occupational activities at home have really helped him maintain some sort of normalcy in his daily routine. And we've seen some improvement from that. But yeah, they're a great strategy you guys talked about.
I think going off of that same point, and using the reframing as well, you can reframe so many of your daily activities to make them something that works on fine motor skills, or make that 5 minutes of just presence with your sibling, or presence with your parent, or anyone really. So one instance that really stood out for me and Ben was that when we were in a medical setting, and he had to go get a checkup done, and he had to get an x-ray, and obviously for an x-ray you have to stand really, really still. Now, it's difficult for me to stand really, really still, and it's a weird room, and there's random people around, and it's a novel situation for everyone involved. But he and I turned it into a game, and to this day he still remembers that game. And from every now and then he'll just come up to me and be like, oh, look at the cool lasers, like if there's some random stoplight at night. And he'll remember those 5 minutes that we spent dressed in random jackets trying to get an x-ray done. But it was a daily event that I had no control over and he had no control over. But those few minutes we used to have such a positive impact. And I think that's part of what this advice can do, is that it's really something you can do every day. If I'm doing the laundry, and laundry can kind of suck, nobody likes doing laundry, it takes forever. But if Ben comes and does it with me and is singing songs the whole time, we're having a great time. And all of those little things, like, it's not just benefiting Ben, I'm having a much better time doing my own chores if I can share that with him.
Right, and it's something that takes time, because, you know, having to reframe thoughts, those are patterns. These are the things, the way that we tend to think all the time. So it takes time to chip away at some of those kind of unhealthy patterns. So it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be 100% of the time. But the more you practice sort of changing your thinking, the more you spread it across different areas of your life. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a start.
Okay, I'm gonna keep writing that later, but I think we're ready to go on to the next question. So this is directed from, this came from a parent of a younger child. So, but it could be used, I guess, in across many different ages. So how would you suggest fostering tolerance in the unaffected sibling? What has worked for you personally, or what, for the clinicians, what do you see as being evidence-based, or things that you have seen clinically worked? And then what should be avoided? And we'll start with Sam.
So in terms of how I grew up with Ben, tolerance was something that came very naturally, and I think I'm very lucky for that. It's definitely the product of just how my family introduced me to Ben and how my family introduced me to how life is going to be with Ben. So there was no point of explanation of being like, okay, the life that you lived before is now going to change completely and you're going to abide by these set of rules. Instead, he joined into our lives the same way that any new addition to a family would, the same way that any younger sibling would. I was lucky because I came first biologically. I just popped up and I had some time to readjust to that. To me, with my parents, spending time with Ben was never something that was forced. It wasn't something that took away from my days. It wasn't something that had to be mandated into the routine. I think that's something that can create a lot of negative feelings when it feels like spending time with family or spending time with a sibling on any like spectrum, no spectrum, any situation. It's difficult when you feel like that's taking away from your personal goals. So the more that you can still have your independence and also have the option to, hey, today I really want to spend time with Ben. And my parents really encouraged those moments where I was like, hey, do you mind if I take Ben to the beach today with me? And they trusted me in that moment. And that's difficult for a parent. There's a lot of things that can happen. I mean, they have to trust me to drive him there safely, make sure that he's eating, drinking, and make sure that he's safe with the water and the people around him. There's that element of trust that my parents gave me that I think was so valuable in my relationship with Ben, because there was never a moment of doubt on either side. He was always comfortable coming with me, and I was always comfortable having him around. I also got really lucky because my friends around me were almost indoctrinated into my life as well. There's a certain way that Ben really likes to have his patterns and his routines. So when new people come in, it's sometimes jarring to them, but because my parents and I are so used to all of his situations, we just throw them into it. There's no hiding his behaviors. There's no hiding the noise that he makes or the YouTube videos that you hear from a street down, not to mention down the hallway. Those are just a part of life. And so I think that normalizing all of these activities that you can very easily feel uncomfortable with was the best way that we could foster tolerance, not just in my family, but also in the people that interact with Ben outside, because it gave him the confidence to not feel uncomfortable around other people. Because the people that we bring in always accepted him and always showed him that unconditional love and that positive regard that Paige was talking about. So everything you do in the home also gives them confidence to introduce themselves to people outside as well. I think Paige is next if you want to go while she's still typing.
Oh, okay. No, Paige, go. No, actually, Erin's next. Sorry.
Erin, sorry.
Don't want to get people out of the routine. Sorry.
So Sam, I think you're indoctrinated as a clinician now, because I had a whole list and I was like, check, she said it, check, she said it. So I think you need a sibling like you. That would be a perfect way, or Nathan, if anybody wants to adopt you guys for the week, then everything will work. There's a couple things you said though, all without joking around. Education, I think, is what we've seen has worked a lot with even the youngest children. So sensitivity training, teaching the unaffected sibling about autism. And exactly when we talk about what should be avoided, I believe it's avoiding talking about it, avoiding hiding the diagnosis, and really teaching our young children early on about differences, same and different, from what you look like to your strengths and weaknesses, to the things you like versus don't like, and that we all have things that are similar. We all have things that are different that make us unique to ourselves, and that being different is not just okay, it's great. This is what makes us important. And if we start teaching our siblings about acceptance of differences, no matter if it's just about the diagnosis, and we add in the autism education component, then knowledge is power, right? And it builds the ability to feel confident and competent in how you move forward. I think that integrating the sibling into therapies as needed without the demand, right? But if you can be a part of it. So I remember going into many houses when I was in practice as a speech pathologist, and the parents would often say to me, well, I'll take my other children out of the room so they're not distracted. And then the other children feel isolated, right? Versus, no, your child needs to learn how to learn in your family, needs how to survive in your family. Let's have the siblings be here. If he can integrate with his siblings, I mean, and grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins galore, well, I'm going to make it work because this is what's the most important versus only being able to work with me in isolation. So feeling that the sibling doesn't have to leave the room and can be a part of it and understand, again, educating is going to be helpful. I think that you also get to then reinforce and reward and provide positive praise in a different way to the unaffected sibling, when the unaffected sibling, if you will, is not part of anything and then doesn't have anything that they can put a name to, but they really understand their brother or sister is not necessarily showing the same interest or the same behaviors as they do or their friends do, then our little kids are really smart, right? And they pick up on these differences, but then they don't necessarily always know how to express what's happening. I think Amanda, Alicia, when she was on the panel, she said that she just always knew that her brother did things a little differently, and she always tended to wanted to teach him, and she didn't realize till a little bit later when her mom finally told her why. And I think that autism is it's just a word, right? And if we talk about it early on, just like we always say, oh, this is a big word for a little kid to learn. It's just a word with more letters. The way that we present the information and teach is going to help our young children understand, be more tolerant. And then I think for parents, if you know that your other child or 3 other children are okay with it, you know that you're okay with it, your partner in life is okay with it, then you're going to do, Samantha, what happened in your family, and everybody just is it's gonna normalize everything. This is the way of your life. And if you want to be a part of it, great. And if you don't, we're going to continue to educate you so that you can hopefully be a part of it someday, because it's going to make you a better person. So I think that everything you said, Sam, is exactly what we do from a clinical standpoint. We just somewhat package it, right? We do it in a sensitivity training, or we have peer training, and we put a name to it, and then we do some research on it to make it look really great and pretty and validate it. But in actuality, your life experience are the things that we would do to build tolerance and try to have a family have an easier time at integrating into life with this.
Kimberly, what would you like to add?
Absolutely. I would say, the best way is to actually not aim for tolerance. I'm going to use an example of a reframe here. Tolerance is not the goal. The goal is higher. It's appreciation and it's acceptance, which is exactly what Aaron and Samantha just said. It's appreciating that autism is a word. Everyone has characteristics. Everyone has pieces of them that we're working on. I'm working on things. My child's working on things. The sibling's working on different items. So pointing out the strengths, but yet still recognizing that it's hard and that sometimes it's just embarrassing when your sibling with autism runs through the room naked during a play date, So acknowledging both, that it's beautiful and there's so many blessings and gifts within it, but it's also quite hard. So, doing both of those. And I think the best way to teach the appreciation and acceptance, and I prefer those, it's just semantics, but like I always think about tolerance. I tolerate a dental exam, I appreciate and accept the differences in people. It's sort of a worldview type of thing of like looking at the strengths in people and celebrating them. That doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge the hard parts, because those are just as important and just as real. But just through modeling it, pointing out the beautiful pieces, that's amazing that, you can remember every single word to that movie, that's something that I could never imagine doing, So modeling that, and you'll see your child do that, it's like, when you see a child with great manners, they usually have a parent with great manners. So they've experienced it, they've learned it, it's been modeled for them repetitively and constantly. So I would say those would be some of the ways. And I can also tell you that parents are doing a great job of this, because siblings, I would love to see a study on this, but siblings just seem to be, siblings of those with special needs, seem to be some of our most empathic human beings. We see them enter helping professions. So I think it's working. So what parents are doing, keep it up.
all really, really important points. And I think there's also this idea of catching, right, rather than trying to build tolerance, let's catch our kids doing the things that we want to see more of, right? The more we bring attention to the behaviors we want to see more of, the more likely they'll engage in them. So for a younger kid, which I know is where this question came from, I love how you showed that toy to your brother or sister. I really like how you shared. It doesn't matter whether the child actually, whether there was actually any reciprocity going on, right? Like, it's the act of making that effort. Even them being in the same room, like, think about, catch them being successful in whatever small success that is. I really like how you came into so-and-so's room, or I really like how you let so-and-so sit on the couch with us, right? Like, catch all of those moments and put that positive attention on the spotlight on that. And that's where kids are going to want to continue to engage in those behaviors, because they're now noticing that positive effect. I think just in kind of rereading the question, there's also that piece of, you know, I think anyone who's logged in right now is already kind of checking off all these boxes, right? So that certainly goes a long way. And I think Sam brought up just such important points about that really is a model for families, right? A model that worked for her family. And I want families not to feel discouraged if that might not be what their dynamic had looked like, right? There is no point where it's not okay to just say, you know what, we're going to make a change, right? We're going to open our doors, and we're going to allow people to really see who our family is and accept that, right? And so I don't think there's any point where we can't get to a situation where we can kind of change our behavior, right? Even for siblings at whatever age they are, who may not be as comfortable with the family dynamic. Those are all things that we can work on, and that we can get to a place that feels a place of appreciation and acceptance, right? It doesn't have to have started there, no matter how old the individuals we're talking about are. And then I think in terms of thinking about one other strategy, and then I'll talk about what to avoid, is also, or I guess it kind of goes along with what to avoid. So a couple ideas of things to avoid. I think one of them that's really important is trying to avoid, and again, it might not be possible all the time, but putting blame on the sibling, right? Like, I can't help you with that because so-and-so needs me to do this, right? That I think we can explain, there's only one of me, and I can't wait to help you with X, and tell them exactly when you'll be able to do it. I'm going to do this first and then this, right? And so I think making sure we don't want anyone to feel that they're a nuisance, or that, you know, that we don't want them to shut down to asking something of their parents because they feel like their parent doesn't have time. I'd also encourage siblings to also feel comfortable letting their parent know, like, we all get into routines, right, where we're super busy, and it's kind of like being on a treadmill, and sometimes we have to stop and say, wait a second, I didn't take any time today, or I didn't take any time the past 5 days to connect with my kid, and I need to make time for that. And I would encourage parents to be thinking about that and making that part of their routine, but also kids to say, hey, I really miss you. I feel like we haven't had any time. Can we make some time, right? Especially, I think, thinking about COVID and the dynamic, I think sometimes it feels like, okay, well, we're all in the same house all day, but that doesn't mean that we're connecting all day or connecting at all, right? In some ways, it feels like we're getting more time, but maybe less quality time. And then I guess the last piece of thinking about what to avoid is telling people how they should feel, right? And we talked a bit about that in the last question, but so important to really validate the emotional experiences of our kids. So we don't want our kid to feel bad because they're frustrated or upset by their sibling. And so in any direction. And so it's really important that we validate their frustration or their sadness, or, you know, the emotional experience that they're having. I think that's so important. In thinking for the future, you want to be a parent that your kid comes to talk about their feelings, right? And so thinking about, I know the question is about younger kids, how can we foster that? Well, we can, from the beginning, as best as we can validate those experiences, reflect what they say, and let them know that they're being heard, and then increase that time to connect, right? So if you see that things are becoming more challenging for any of your kids, think about, okay, I need to dedicate some additional time to connect. And I think that in and of itself, once you have that connection, and Sam, you gave such a great example of, I think, not just the fact that you connected, but that you noticed you were connecting, right? And that's what you're going for, not like this forced, I'm going to connect. It's like, I'm going to set this time and I'm going to be so present, and I'm going to have that natural excitement that you just described about doing laundry, right? Like being able to recognize those moments is so important.
I think the point about blame is really excellent. Just to piggyback on that real quickly, I think it's important to also not blame the sibling for perhaps what you would consider being a trigger, like expecting them to be a mini adult when they're just being a child, and maybe they take a toy or maybe they do something that a child would do that inadvertently affects the child with special needs. So kind of keeping your expectations that they're a child. I think a lot of times they feel, oh, let me not mess this up for the family. Let me, rise above and be a little mini adult. So also not blaming the unaffected sibling.
Absolutely.
Incidents that occur. And if you do, sometimes in a moment we all snap, right? Oh, why did you do that? It's going to upset him. That's your opportunity to go back and kind of redo, fix, and model that, mommy made a mistake. I reacted too quickly. I'm sorry that I made you feel as if it was your fault. And that's your chance to kind of go back and fix it, because, you're human as a parent as well.
Kim, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think giving yourself permission to be human, to make mistakes, and having judgment-free zone in those cases, and really in many cases, and for our kids and the siblings that are unaffected, that if they are angry, that they're allowed to be angry in that moment, and the fact that they're communicating versus shutting down with us is important. And I think that we don't always give ourselves permission to make mistakes. And then for adults, for us to own our mistakes to our children is huge. For our children to see that, what, mommy or daddy or whomever makes mistakes and they say that they did it wrong. That the humility in that is huge, and the accountability, that to me breeds that your child starts to respect you so much more when they see that nobody's perfect and that things are hard for you, even though you are supposed to be adulting all the time. And so, and speaking about the moment, Sam, like, and what your moment with the cool laser and the laundry, and Paige, what you were saying, I didn't realize until just recently, because I always try to plan these special moments in my personal life with my child because of, let's say, my work schedule. And those are usually the moments that don't always connect because I have such an agenda, right? And there was something that happened recently that made me think when you made the point of the moment that's not planned, the moment that you just happen to be aware that it's happening in that moment. And I think that those are the ones that are going to allow you to just have your light shine bright. And those are the ones that are going to be, Dr. Marlene Sotelo would say, the sticking factor for what's to come. And so I think that's such great advice, is just to all of a sudden recognize in that moment that that is the moment, that is your 5 minutes, that it didn't need to be planned in addition. That if you just, they say, smell the roses, right there. If you just notice it, then you probably have many moments that were those 5 minutes that the research say make a difference. We just are so stressed or always planning for the next that we don't even realize when we've had them.
I don't want to take up too much space, but I just wanted to, I think it's important to mention as well that there's not a perfect day. There's not a perfect situation. There's nothing that's ever going to work out just the way that you wanted it to. And I think that Erin's point of saying that, like, the times when we thought that we would plan this amazing little, like, magical moment of like, oh, this will be my epiphany. It's okay if that doesn't work. It's okay if it didn't work yesterday. It might work tomorrow. Maybe today you had that 2 seconds where you were like, oh my gosh, there's this blissful peace. And then there's singing. And you know what? Love the singing too. And it's okay if you have those arguments. Like, I have fought with my brother so many times because he recently learned like a hitting behavior. And of course, we're gonna like gently work through him with that. Everybody shows frustration in different ways, but oh my gosh, sometimes I really just want to hold him and just squish him a little bit, and that's okay too. because it just happens. Every kid is going to have that moment. There is sibling. And I think that's the part to me that our whole group is so important for, is that we're not here to give you the perfect answer to every question. We're here to tell you that, hey, in my life, this one kind of worked and this one didn't really work, but every day is going to look a little different. Maybe today I'm going to be able to book those 5 minutes and Ben's going to love that schedule. And other times he wants me there for 3 hours longer than I have. And oh my gosh, how lucky am I, even though that kind of sucks that I have to go. But it's just about understanding that, like, I don't want anyone that's listening to feel that we have this beautifully perfect situation and oh my gosh, she's so tolerant, she has all these things. Like, no, there's so many moments where that's not true, but that makes those 5 minutes so much more special.
We're all a work in progress, right?
Yeah, I know we're running a little short of time, but I would just quickly add to that I think, speaking from my personal experience, my parents did like an outstanding job at really helping me learn patience and tolerance of Charles's differences by encouraging me to really explore his hardship from his perspectives. And so I guess a little background, Charles had some language capability when he was younger, but over time, due to his severe epilepsy, he has lost that ability to speak, and now he's pretty much nonverbal now. So understanding that he couldn't communicate through traditional methods took some time for me to get, I guess, took some time to get used to. Interacting with Charles wasn't really intrinsically rewarding. He didn't reciprocate that same level of communication, and his attention would avert to other things. And so it was hard for me to, want to bring myself to hang out with Charles and really spend a lot of time with him. But, my parents encouraged me to, understand that, it's probably frustrating for him that he can't communicate the things that he wants to us. He can't tell us when he wants to go to the bathroom or when he's hungry, and it's probably frustrating for him. And a lot of the behaviors that we saw were probably a result of that. And, I guess Aaron had mentioned therapy, I believe, bringing the sibling to therapy. And my parents actually did that quite often. Charles's speech, occupational and physical therapy, I would come along with. And that really opened my eyes to how the therapist interacted with Charles and how they took a very analytical approach to his behaviors and telltale signs of, him communicating that I was kind of, I guess, ignorant of prior to that. And so Kimberly had mentioned the appreciation and acceptance of Charles, I guess. And my parents really did a great job of highlighting that, Charles wasn't he wasn't capable of ill intent, and he wouldn't do anything to hurt a fly. And, his behaviors, even though he would grab my food sometimes, it was never with ill intent. And he was, always has the kindest nature. And I think growing up seeing that, my parents did a great job of highlighting that to me, and that really stuck with me, and really gave me tolerance and patience and appreciation for Charles's differences. So